we talked about the Bitcoin ledger, okay? And one of the important characteristics of the Bitcoin ledger is that it's fully auditable by anyone that has that code. Anyone that has a Bitcoin full node, which you can download, you can put it on a device like this and run a Bitcoin full node. You personally can audit every transaction that ever occurred, the full set of transactions from the date that Bitcoin was launched in January of 2009 to today. But that has privacy implications, because now Bitcoin transactions are sent from person to person, not through their names. It's sent through a string of letters and numbers called a Bitcoin address. So you can send Bitcoin to someone's address, sort of like a number to count. And there's cryptography behind those addresses that sort of underlies how the system works. But those addresses, if those addresses can be tied to a person's IP address or tied to a person's identity, then it opens up a whole door for tracking and tracing financial transactions that go on the Bitcoin network. And there's danger in that. We've come to a place in society in America, particularly post 9/11, where we're getting more and more comfortable, I think, there's some of the folks in the audience, probably lived through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. During that era, people were, I think, more concerned than they are today about keeping their information private. We've given up a lot of privacy in the information space to companies in Silicon Valley, and where the business model of the entity is to absorb your information and sell it. We've gotten comfortable with that because we like free stuff, and that's what we get. Google's free. The cost of using Google is that Google absorbs your information like a vacuum cleaner and sells it to third parties. Now, when you're talking about finance, though, it's a little bit different. I think people still want to maintain some semblance of privacy in their financial transactions. And what's going on in the regulatory space, and I know this isn't a legal talk, but what's going on in the regulatory space right now is that, outside of individuals running these nodes themselves, these peer-to-peer nodes, regulators are stepping in and saying each of the on-ramps, each of the, equivalents of the bank in the Bitcoin space, Coinbase, other entities that allow people to buy and sell Bitcoin, they have to gather and store your information and make it available to the government. So from that point, when that I, Doug Pepe, am the person who has, let's say, one Bitcoin in this address, you can trace, and maybe the next person, the Bob, I'm the Alice in this example, and the Bob has a Bitcoin address, and that's been tied to their identity through another institution using this KYC, know your customer regulatory requirement. Then once you start to identify all of the individuals in the system by their addresses, you can track and trace basically the entire economy. Now, that's not sort of where Bitcoin is right now, but it is, as years go on and on and on, there are companies, the sole function of which is to identify individuals and structure Bitcoin transactions to help identify who the actual real world actors are in the system. There are privacy coins that have a little bit of a different model and use sort of complex cryptography to shield the source and the recipient of transactions. That's one sort of model that has grown up to address this. There are issues with those kinds of coins. It's just a different type of system.